It's Los Angeles in the mid-1990s. And a young man, let's call him Tavares Smalls, is celebrating his 18th birthday. And he's with his friends, partying it up, playing video games, doing what kids do. Now, at this time in Los Angeles, LA was known as the bank robbery capital of the world. And Tavares Smalls and his crew decided that they were gonna do some licks, some bank robberies. And they committed several armed bank robberies in and around the Los Angeles region. Unfortunately for Mr. Smalls, the FBI got a tip, and he and his crew were arrested and indicted. The charge, bank robbery with a dreaded 924C enhancement. Now, 924C, as we commonly call it, is an enhancement for using a gun during the commission of a crime of violence. And at that time, each 924C could add a consecutive term of 20 years on top of the underlying conviction. So Mr. Smalls was facing a lot of time because he'd been charged with a number of bank robberies and a number of 924Cs. Mr. Smalls decides to plead guilty, and so he's in court for his sentencing. He's got his defense lawyer by his side. He's staring up at the judge, and he looks across the courtroom, and who does he see? Me. I'm in my third year as a federal prosecutor in Los Angeles, and I am arguing the sentence that the law allows in this case, up to 65 years in prison. But unbeknownst to anyone else in the courtroom, my mind is playing tricks on me. My head is spinning. 65 years? This kid's 18 years old. Now, don't get me wrong. He committed a crime, a violent crime, a serious crime. But in my head, I was saying, are we saying that this kid should go to prison till he's 83 years old? 73? 63? 53? He's 18 years old. My head is spinning, and in my head, there's a question that is pounding. Is this justice? My name is André Birotte, Jr. I'm a United States District Judge in Los Angeles, a federal judge. I am the proud son of Haitian immigrants. My mom was an elementary school teacher, and my father was an orthopedic surgeon. And as my father's namesake, I was expected to follow in his footsteps and pursue a career in medicine. That is until I came to this very university, took a chemistry class, and realized very quickly that being a doctor was not going to be in the cards for me. I see some of you might relate to that. So after a lot of soul searching, I decided that I wanted to go to law school. And while in law school, I guess I got bit by that criminal law bug. Something about it really attracted me. I think it was really the notion that it was an area of the law that I found that I could try to help people, whether it was victims of crimes or people who had been charged with crimes, both going through a very stressful and traumatic experience in their lives. Like I said, I just gravitated to it, I held on to it, and I never let go. I started my career as a deputy public defender in Los Angeles. I was representing individuals who had been charged with crimes who could not afford a lawyer. And in that job, I found out very quickly, perhaps naively, there were some things that I was gonna get exposed to that I didn't expect. Now again, don't get me wrong. I expected to represent people who had been charged with crimes, like theft. And I did. But I was also representing individuals that were so riddled in their addiction or substance abuse or alcohol abuse that they were stealing to support their habits. I also expected to represent people who had been charged with violent crime, like assault and battery, and I did. But I was also representing individuals that were so suffering such mental trauma, they actually thought that aliens were being brought down from space to attack them and they were defending themselves. My point in saying this is simply that with every defendant I represented, every case, there was always another story. And sometimes that story was bigger than the actual crime itself. And even though prosecutors, defense lawyers, and judges, we were all doing our level best to ensure that justice was being done, there'd be a client, a case, a sentence, and I would go home with my head still pounding with that question. Is this justice? 3 years after I became a public defender, I had an opportunity to switch sides. I became a federal prosecutor in Los Angeles. It was somewhat of a dream job for me. Now in that chair, you start to look at punishment and accountability from a different framework. In that chair, I was meeting the victims of crimes, the victim bank tellers in a bank robbery, the people who had their life savings taken away from them from a scam artist, or even those children and young adults who had been abused and they had to walk around the rest of their lives wondering who had or who would see the unspeakable things that were done to them that were videotaped being distributed throughout the world. So in that realm, when you ask that question, is this justice? The answer might be a little clearer. You've got someone who's done a horrible crime, you have to hold them accountable, and you have to protect the community. So in that realm, the answer may be yes, punishment is appropriate. That is until you're staring across in a courtroom to an 18-year-old kid arguing that this person might go to prison for the rest of his life. I remember being in this courtroom wondering, what is his story? Now, as a public defender, I had the chance to hear it so much from the horse's mouth. But now as a prosecutor, I didn't hear it. And so I would wonder, what was his story? And would it make a difference? Or should it make a difference? Fast forward to 2010, I was honored in what arguably was one of the proudest accomplishments of my legal career. I was nominated by President Obama to serve as the United States Attorney for the Central District of California. I was now the head of one of the largest U.S. Attorney's offices in the country, the very same office that I had served as a young prosecutor. And at that time, my boss, the Attorney General of the United States, Eric Holder, he issued a memorandum to all prosecutors throughout the country. And in that memorandum, he urged us to look at crime from a different lens, to consider the individual circumstances and individual characteristics of each defendant when we were making our sentencing recommendations. This was a significant memo for prosecutors throughout the country. And I remember I was talking with a judge who I'd respected about the memo and the criminal justice system in general, and he was saying, you know, Andre, there's no real program that deals with these defendants from the front end. Something that gives these defendants an opportunity to prove that they could be productive members of society. You should think about that. And I said, you know, that's a great idea, but can I do that? Then I thought, I'm the boss. I have this opportunity. I'm the U.S. Attorney, so if anyone's gonna have a chance, it would be me, and I would have to take advantage of it and run with it. So that's what we did. Had an excellent team of prosecutors in my office. We worked with the public defender's office, day and night, coming up with a framework, plan, brought in probation, pretrial, came to the judges with a proposal, and boom, the Casa program was formed. Now, Casa stands for the Conviction and Sentencing Alternative Program. And here's how it works. An individual who's charged with a federal crime, who's looking at a conviction and or federal prison time, he's given an alternative. If he or she can successfully complete the program, either they will serve a probationary sentence and not go to prison, or in some instances, their case will be dismissed. This was a very unique program, something that had never been started. Now, as U.S. Attorney, because I was running the office and dealing with the day-to-day stuff, I didn't have a chance to really get into the program and meet the Casa participants on a regular basis. But in 2014, I was nominated and confirmed to be a district judge, the position that I hold today, and that gave me the opportunity to be involved in the program. And once I had that opportunity, I've been involved ever since. Now, I have to tell you, being involved in the Casa program is one of the hardest things I do as a judge. And I say that because every week when we meet with the Casa participants, we're dealing with issues of mental abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, you name it. And we are forced to confront the reality for many folks. Life is extremely, extremely difficult and challenging. Now, we usually start out our meetings every week going around asking folks how their week was. And you might be surprised that things that may be commonplace to you and I are significant challenges and victories for the Casa participants. You hear stories about people celebrating 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks of sobriety, and they've never been sober since their teenage years. People who are happy about receiving a legitimate paycheck or having a legitimate job because the only money they've ever made in their adult life is out hustling in the streets. We had one Casa participant, she got up and she proudly stated, "I'm really happy, guys. I had a really tough week. I got into a fight with one of my coworkers." And she said, "In my old life, I would have just grabbed a pen or a knife and I would have shanked him. But I didn't. I calmed down. We fought, we worked through the issues, and I kept it moving." These are the kind of things, these are the small victories that serve as building blocks for a brighter future for these Casa participants. Now, don't get me wrong. This Casa program is not easy. Many of the participants bristle at the weekly requirements of meetings, counseling sessions, homework assignments. Some relapse into their addictions. And then there are some that drop out of the program. They say, "I just can't do it." Or they're kicked out of the program and they are subsequently prosecuted. But what keeps the program going is that for the Casa participants that are in the program, they are all in. And when they are all in, they win. They achieve small victories week by week by week that gives them a foundation to a brighter future. Now, I've been involved in the criminal justice system for almost 25 years. And I've heard a lot of stories. And there are times, I will tell you, even when you hear the people's stories, punishment is the appropriate remedy. But I would submit to you that the more we hear stories, there are opportunities for us to do something different. To look at that person and say, "Look, you messed up, but we're gonna give you an opportunity to prove to this court, your community, your family members, and most importantly, yourself, that you can do better." Now, when I meet with the folks in the Casa program, I meet with each and every participant at the beginning of the program, and I ask them the same question. I say, "Have you seen the movie Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory?" Okay. And now I'm getting so old, I have to add the second question. Have you seen the Johnny Depp version or the Gene Wilder version? I'm old school, so I'm about Gene Wilder. And they all say yes. And I say, "Congratulations, you have just received the golden ticket." And just like the movie, you're gonna go through some trials and tribulations. But if you keep your head up, you stay focused, you're a good person, you work hard, you have a chance to change the pathway of your life. Are you up for the challenge? And the vast majority of folks, as I mentioned earlier, they are all in, and they achieve some phenomenal victories. Reconnecting with their families, sobriety for years, job placement. We had one Casa participant go on to graduate from law school and is now practicing law in Los Angeles. When I began my talk with you all today, I asked the question, is this justice? And even now as a sitting judge, there are days where I go home and that question is still pounding in my head. But I do know this, each and every time I see someone graduate from our Casa program, I know we're getting closer to seeing justice done. Thank you.